Is this 8?
Wow. Is this 8? No, man, it's 9. Do you believe that?
All right. Last week was 8. Holy cow.
Yeah, last week was 8. This week is 9. Hey, everybody. How are you doing out there? Welcome to another edition of the Rock Runners Report, the 9th edition, Zel. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know. I thought it was it. No, I was like, man, these weeks are kind of these weeks are becoming a blur. No, it's awesome, man. Nine, dude, that's awesome.
9.
9 times.
Yep, 9 hours of no, actually 9 episodes. Way more hours than that.
Yeah, like probably about 20 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've
because Lordy, we can get on it.
Oh, my stars in heaven. And we absolutely have a very interesting podcast today. I think that it's going to be fun. This is going to be an interesting chat. But I thought we'd probably start with the fact that we find ourselves here on the 20th of July, and it looks to be that 317.2 is in a much more stable place, and it's right around the corner. What do you think of that?
Like if we were going to put money on it, you think it's going to be the end of the week, right? You're thinking maybe could be possibly the end of the week. But if I was gonna put my money on it, I still would say mid next week, sometime 27th, 28th.
Yeah, you've been consistent about that for sure, and I still think, I have a feeling it's gonna. That's my thought. It's gonna drop. I would think maybe Friday. That would only be a couple days from now. Or Saturday potentially even. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but you know what? It absolutely could be next week, and I don't really know. I haven't been keeping up with the issue council as much as some people, and so they may, other people may know better than me.
Well, I believe they're going to do at least one more run of the Siege of Orison. Load up the servers again like they did. A lot of people were going, oh, we're going to get 100 people servers. No, they were loading the servers to see, what would break. And so they're probably going to load the servers again with the Siege. And, from what I read, a lot of the things things like elevators are still, in a bad spot right now. Grim Hex is still messed up. Orison's still jacked up. Of course, this is, mostly the load on the server, having those low server ticks where, the elevators aren't working properly. From what I understand, the NPCs are with as it relates to the Siege are even loaded with the server loaded with 100 people are still working pretty good. And I think that's the metric that they're trying to do. If they can tune it in such a way where you put a complete load on the server and then be able to tune the AI, something that we're going to get into later, and it works pretty good at that point, which they also are all probably getting a lot of data and, and some new metrics for 318 for server meshing as well. So I don't know, man. I still think there's a little bit of tweaking to be done. So like I said, my money's on maybe, I know we talked about this before, that they're really wanting to push 317.2 out the door as quickly as they can. And, what systemic bugs remain, we'll just have to remain. But, because they're really wanting to get on the 318, start driving that, because with a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight, server meshing and then having the server load being spread across is going to help a lot of these bugs.
It is.
Spreading the load across, multiple servers is going to help a lot in, how the game runs. So I think that's what they're really pushing for. They know that a lot of these systemic bugs that they will try to, you know, get the game running the best it can because they know in the, for 318, a lot of that stuff will be fixed with server meshing.
It will. And I mean, and one of the things I will say is in Zel and my defense, I mean, I know that there was a patch that came out tonight, the 3.17.2Q patch, and they do mention that they did a performance patch for a performance polish patch for FPS AI behavior, which, by all accounts was starting to work better. But they did mention UGF, Grimhex, EasyHab, and the landing zone elevators are now operating correctly, and several more, fixes here and there. But it's one of those things where, we haven't been into the game, so we can't necessarily confirm any of that stuff. And, it's not to say they haven't, they've certainly in the past have kind of taken some cracks at those things. And so knowing that they're going back and working on them, they're really starting to kind of get into the last few big ticket items, I think, that are precluding them from releasing 3.17.2. And I couldn't agree more. I think that, they really want to get 3.17.2 out there in some kind of a state where it's at least going to be good enough, because 3.18 is really going to be a huge lift. And it's so weird, and I wanted to get your opinion on this, Ellen. We didn't really talk about this before. I actually heard a couple of people say that they think that 3.18 will not be out till December. Just kind of, they were theory crafting on that. What do you think about that?
I don't know, man. Like I said, well, honestly, we'll have to see how, Evocati goes. They know that there's definitely going to be a pretty good lead time on the development of 3.18. That's for sure. So, that's one of the reasons why they're trying to, push 3.17.2 out the door so quickly, is that, they want to really, really, really start working on 3.18. Before, we were definitely thinking September. It may be another one of those situations, depending on how buggy server meshing gets, or the implementation of it all. I would say, just going back to what we were saying before, being able to spread the load across all those different servers are going to, solve a lot of the problems that we're seeing right now. Sure. Even way back, like, 3.14 and, things like that. But
I mean, the persistent...
I wouldn't, look, the way I'd see it, dude, is that I would not, no. They'll put it into a state that's halfway playable, because their big push is to have 4.0 and Pyro by the first of the year. So I honestly do not think that this is going to, especially them trying to stick to a timeline. No, I don't think 3.18 will go to December. I don't.
Yeah.
Whether it goes into October, maybe, for sure.
Yeah.
One of the things, I said this way back when, and then started kind of walking it back a little bit, because I was like, oh, maybe not. But, you and I had actually talked about this a little bit too, is I believe they've put all the resources on working on 3.18 even months back. That was their big milestone, to the road to Pyro. So, especially putting in all these new gameplay features like salvage and getting the cargo refactor. Those are big ticket items for future, for the future stuffs, especially Pyro. Now, it's hard to dictate innovation, and if things don't work, they don't work. But like I said, I have, I honestly believe they've been working on 3.18 stuff for a couple of months now. They've been really backburnering everything else. That's why 317 was in such a bad state, because they've been kind of kicking the can down the road, knowing that 318 is where most of the fixes are going to come from server meshing. So honestly believe, now, would it go into October? Yeah, maybe, depending on if they can square it up. But I honestly believe if it got to the point where it was least playable, no, they would not carry it into December. No, because Pyro is their big goal for next year, the beginning of next year. So no, I don't see it going to December.
I definitely understand where you're coming from. I am not sure. I mean, I am really on the fence about. Here's the one thing that I would have a hard time believing, that we would not be off 317.2 kind of like as IAE hits. I would imagine, like, boy, before then that would seem like that would be kind of a big marketing thing to kind of push the whole persistent entity streaming and cargo refactor and all that stuff around that time. But I can tell you that I have a feeling that you're right. I don't think the cargo refactor and the persistent entity streaming stuff would be like lined up if they weren't hadn't been doing some of the back end work to kind of have it lined up. So,
well, we know they've been doing the back end work now for months.
Right.
I mean, we could, definitely tell it in the servers. So, they've been manipulating that stuff on the back end for a long time. Like I said, I honestly believe they've been working on this stuff for quite a little while. I think they've got a decent handle on it. A lot of that stuff changes. When you put it on a local server and everything's great, you're like, oh, this is pretty good. And you think well, maybe it's ready for prime time. And then you load up a server, everything breaks.
Well, here's the one thing that lends me pause. And me, I am a complete glass is half full guy on Star Citizen. I would never describe myself as a white knight, but I am super high up. I'm super positive on the project. I love it. I understand that it has an enormous amount of technical hurdles, but those don't scare me because of what they're trying to accomplish is so incredible. But I will say the one thing that lends me pause, and I'll share this with you, is it does seem interesting to me that we've not seen one animation of like a box snapping on top of another box on a grid. We haven't seen anything that would indicate that, like I've seen not a shred of anything that would indicate that they're ready to kind of physicalize inventory. But you know what? They very well could just be waiting for 317.2 to kind of get out before they kind of begin kind of, inviting us in the door to look at some of that content.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that they were talking about with, Jared was talking about the other day when they went on their little quarter hiatus, that, when they get back, all his stuff is going to be dedicated to 318 stuff. So,
right.
Of course, I think they were just kind of holding off on all that stuff till, and of course, that would put it in line with next week when, if they release 317.2, when I think, when I surmise that they're going to do it, because that week, all that stuff, they're going to start talking 318 up when it comes, because that they'll be out, back from their hiatus. So, yeah, I think, I believe they're going to spend,
it's interesting
spend
for
as
sure.
much time as they possibly can to tweak 317.2 the best they can. But, it'll be next week and they're going to release it, whether, elevators at Grim Hex are working or not.
Well, like I said, the patch notes tonight indicate they are. That's necessarily no guarantee, but
Right.
it does seem like those were kind of had gotten high up on the list, and they did mention with the patch tonight that they fixed those. And here's the one thing I will say. Like I said, like with my kind of little bit more aggressive timeline, thinking Friday or maybe Saturday they might release it. Here's the other thing. If they're going to be doing an SC Live next week, or they're going to be doing, like an Inside Star Citizen next week, which I honestly don't know if they have one planned or not. But if they do have one planned and it's going to be full of 318 stuff, then why not take a few extra days? If it, what's the difference between Saturday and a Wednesday, or a Thursday or a Tuesday release, right? Why not take a couple more days if there's a couple of other things, anything that they can do to kind of just, put as whatever little bit more polish or fix another little bug or two, or maybe I know that there's a couple of ships that have some elevator issues or some door issues or those types of things. Why not try and throw a little bit more of that stuff in there, fixes close a little bit more of that technical debt. I know that some of the big ticket things you wouldn't want to necessarily mess with, but if there's not an opportunity for a couple more days of programming and knock out a few more bugs, considering it is going to be a longer phase than usual, it would make sense. And which would kind of more put it towards those dates that you were thinking about.
Yeah. We do kind of look at this as as a content patch,
Yes.
but there's also going to be new technologies in it as well, like nav mesh.
Yes. A very important one.
For these derelict missions, and so there's going to be a lot of new things on the horizon as well. I know that had a lot to do, with the amount of time that they put into this, but I think the real goal is to get this out the door as quickly as possible. I honestly don't think it's going to be this weekend. But I could be wrong. But just like you were saying a minute ago, yeah, most definitely take another couple of days to put some polish on it. Get rid of the most egregious bugs, and start gearing up for getting 318 to the Evocati.
Yeah, and I will say, I did just so I stay true to the crew, right? Like I did some a stream on Tuesday night, and the mole was still working. By the way, I should throw that out there. The mole continued to work, and scanning. Actually, the game was in a very stable place. It was very stable. I really loved the fact that there was still a lot of rocks I scanned in the air in Halo. Like it comes in bunches. Ones that you kind of get the diamond icons. They don't necessarily tell you what type they are. But for the most part, I'm happy to report that scanning seemed like it was in a good place. It seemed really solid. Still kind of that active ping method worked really well. And then on both, I did a little bit of Lyria mining and a little bit of Air and Halo mining, and it seemed good. Seemed solid.
Well, with a lot of that dead rocks and having those kind of phantom rocks, the non-scannables, server meshing is going to help that a bunch.
Yeah, you would hope. I don't know. I don't know what the root cause of that issue is, but it has been around for a long. I've been mining since 3.11, and there have been unscannable rocks that entire time. That's never ever changed, and it must be some kind of a thing where there's an underlying tech there. It probably is. I know that, for instance, I know we've seen, occasionally in 3.17 where you have kind of the ghost rocks on the planet surface, where it looks like there are actually rocks down there, and you land and you can kind of walk right in. There's no hit marker. You know what I mean? There's no, you just can walk right into the middle of them. They're like the image is there, but they're not actually there. And we've seen servers kind of act that way. And what's interesting is you can actually fly from like a little bit further away, and they're happening just fine. So there is some kind of like It's that tech, right, where they kind of stream things in as you're close,
Yep.
and
Yeah,
some of it doesn't always kind of line up right. I think.
I think it's it's one of those deals where it's a server resource problem
Sure.
where, when you do, well, we know how this works. We're going to actually talk a little bit about it tonight
Yeah, we are.
and kind of get in a little bit right now. But yeah, it's the entity streaming, right? So when you get close to something, it'll start, I call it drawing it in, where, it physicalizes that object.
Right.
And I think when the servers are being taxed and the resources aren't there, it kind of bugs it out where the the planet says, "Hey, there's rocks here," and then it sends the information to the server and says, "Hey, you need to define what type of rocks are here." And then the server, it doesn't, it never responds because, there's being, it's being so many resources being drawn off of it. Those particular things about, oh, well, we're trying to allocate resources somewhere else. And it kind of bugs it out and never, puts in the information that's supposed to be there. I believe once we get into that point where start sharing the load across the servers, a lot of those problems, at least the idea of them will get fixed. Whether, there's always going to be certain bugs, one way or another. But, I think a lot of those type of issues where it's, resource allocation issues, it'll fix a lot of that.
I agree. I mean, at least that's the goal, right? I mean, is to have this persistent entity streaming. That's there is an enormous. It's so funny how in this very linear fashion there is these kind of precursor, kind of foundational technologies that have to get in place to kind of open up the door to the rest of the game, and when you have a game like Star Citizen with the incredible level of fidelity that it has, and that it's going to continue to have, and they don't seem to be in any way, shape, or form slowing down on fidelity. I mean, if you just kind of wander around the ship, and you start looking at wall panels and just the detail is absolutely stunning, and you will find all sorts of Easter eggs everywhere because they've really done an incredible job with that kind of thing. But it is incredibly costly for server resources to do those types of things, and
It really is.
and
Yeah.
that's why the persistent entity streaming is so important. We're going to get into that, here in just we've started to get into it, but we're going to really get into it here in a minute. I do want to say a couple things though. The roadmap roundup for July 2020 was very, very small. They talked about kind of adding the Centurion, which I think, by the way, we've talked about that guy a little bit. I think that's cool. And then really just kind of moving some teams around. The props team is undergoing some changes. They say part of the team has been integrated into the Sandbox and Squadron 42. Art teams, in order to work more closely with the environment, level design, and mission design disciplines, in order to greatly increase efficiency. So, that's primarily it. The roadmap roundup was very, very, very condensed. There wasn't a whole lot in there. And what do you think about that? Centurion, and so we moved some teams around for a roadmap roundup.
Yeah, I believe a lot of this is kind of shifting focus, kind of calm before the storm.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's I believe in the next 2 months they're gonna, turn the fire hose on.
They are.
We're gonna get, a lot of information, which is, stuff that we love. It's good for us. So,
It is. It is.
so we kind of hit that little summer lull.
Oh, it has been especially with kind of like activity in the game. I mean, organizationally, we've had a huge lull. I know just a lot of players who are kind of taking a little break right now. And it's actually it's not necessarily an unhealthy thing, to kind of have a little bit of time in the summers, do some, do some of the summer things you like to do, get outside, take the walks,
Yeah, we put our little guys on a break. We did a little mini summer vacation.
We did. And it's a healthy thing because we all know that as soon as the patch drops, we're going to be right back to work. And, we're not going to work. We're going to work very hard, but we understand we're not rebuilding the same fleets that we've had, right? We very much believe, we'll continue to say this on the podcast so people don't miss it or kind of go too hard. Don't burn yourself out. It's only going to be a, 90, 120 day, 150 day, 120 days probably. It's going to get wiped again. So don't get out there and get too crazy. Certainly identify, prioritize those things. But yeah, I think it's one of those things. It's not going to be it's not going to be too far around the corner. You don't want to just get that third 890 jump in the hangar only to have that thing taken away.
No, absolutely. Just get out and have a good time with the game, and honestly, don't take it too seriously. We love what we do.
Yes.
And we'll be putting the nose to the grindstone again because we're kind of sadists like that, right? We love the hard work. We love we love to work towards these big goals. So every 2, 3, 4 months, we'll have to we know we'll have to do it right again. So up until at least beta.
It's exactly right.
We're so don't get attached to things. Work towards those goals. Have fun in the game, but don't make it a big deal. And know that as much as they say they don't want to wipe the server, a lot of these, especially with a lot of these new tech they're implementing, it is most definitely going to be wiped.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I wouldn't necessarily, put money on, but I would have a hard time believing, as we sit here today, knowing the fundamental core changes in the back-end technology and just the game in general that 318 brings, that it's very hard to imagine that there would not be a wipe. To me, it's kind of a foregone conclusion.
Well, a little bit with what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to be drawing from our personal experience. You work in the server world. That's one of the things that I'm exposed to a lot of that, and pretty deep into tech as well. You work in that server environment every day. That's your big thing. So I mean, these are things that from our point of view doesn't necessarily mean that we're 100% correct, but from our point of view and from our experience, these are things we'll be talking about a little bit tonight. So especially on our subject as it relates to AI and how we know that servers function,
and how Star Citizen is really going to change the game on just kind of on that thing. It's going to be an absolute paradigm shift from, and I really want to take a moment, if you'll let me, and set the stage a little bit for this, just because it's something I've really thought about a lot, and it really has struck me since I started doing kind of the AI in Star Citizen has always been something that I have thought, is kind of fascinating and, surface level. But, as somebody who has, in all honesty, at this stage in my life, I think that I have probably almost as much computer gaming experiences as anybody, in a way, right? I mean, if I take in the 80s, spent an enormous amount of time playing computer games, Commodore 64, and of course all the other, lots of different friends had TRS-80s. Lots of other friends had, Amigas. There were all sorts of different, systems around. But being somebody who, kind of, had a 386 SX16 and a 486 DX266 and, and all of those eras, where there were these games that came along and just kind of changed everything. Like when, like Doom or whatever hit, or, when Asheron's Call and EverQuest kind of happened, or, in those types of things. And of course, Galaxies, which is one of our favorite games, or how World of Warcraft and don't get me wrong, there's a trillion other titles, but the one thing I really want to talk about is how Star Citizen is really going to try, and whether or not they pull this off or not remains to be seen, but I believe that they're taking an enormous amount of resources and contributing it to kind of a leap forward from, say, completely algorithms, like very, very specific code, even though the code had, variables and that type of thing, a very type of specific way that monsters worked, pathing worked. It was all algorithmic. It was all based on, just a certain amount of, code, basically kind of defining exactly how it works. And they're changing that to include a system where there is, AI, and there is navigation meshes. But more than that, there's an entire back-end simulation that allows you to kind of simulate the entirety of all the solar systems, and then stream that into Fidelity, which is extremely expensive, and then when you're not close, just kind of stream it, like have that thing go right back into the ether and continue on its way, depending on, what the outcome of you crossing paths were. That is a fundamental paradigm shift from all the other programs, and games before it. I don't know of any other games myself, and maybe you know better than me, Zel, that are trying to so fundamentally change the way that computer gaming works.
Well, us talking about quantum, which, with, this is Tony's big baby, where, they're simulating basically the whole universe, the economy, the interactions with the AI on the back end. You can, when you kind of look at it at surface value, it's almost kind of like, especially when you're dealing with this simulation, it's kind of, at first blush, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, well, it's a computer simulation where it's just basically resource allocation. Take a game, take like a RTS game that's like a, resource allocation type game, like did you ever play Anno or, any of these other, like builder games where, you have to, you start a little town, and that town, needs resources. So whatever it is, you have to build mines, and then you have to get, something to transport the ore from the mines to the forges, and then from the forges, then you have to have them transported to where they make weapons or
the manufacturing facilities, right?
Yeah, exactly, where you have these facilities, these manufacturing facilities. And then if you ever played these were just kind of like the very early RTS games, but if you play something really complex like Anno 1800 or whatever, the it gets pretty complex. There's every little thing, is supported by, some other resource allocation. And when you kind of look at it, it's like, ooh, well, that's kind of like the way it is. But, that isn't, that simulation, it's not a simulation. That's you building all that stuff out. I mean, you kind of have a base level of AI that, they know that, they're running out of resources. They need more resources. And when you look at the statistics, it's like, well, geez, I need more fields, for food production, or I need more, I need more mines for ore production, or I need, more oil wells for, kind of rubbers and plastic production, that type of thing. And
Sure.
when you basically go to the level that they are with quantum, of actually programming these AI individually, down to the point where, they have their own capabilities, their own, proficiencies, where, it's like they build in, it's like, well, are you a combat AI, or are you a manufacturing AI, or are you a science AI,
Right.
or whatever the capability is, or, are you a miner? And then they kind of program, it's like, well, you know what's the best method of making money? Is it, oh, I'm going to go, what pays more? You go over here, then you have a bunch of miners doing this. And then they even put it on a morality curve. So it's like, does it pay more? Does it pay more for you to be a security personnel or a pirate? So then it's like, well, does, being security pay 100 and a pirate pay 100? But then you have that, morality variable, where it's like, well, you know, I'm a kind of a bad guy, so I end up becoming a pirate. You know, but that's a very simplistic way, but of kind of explaining it. I mean, but they're getting pretty deep into programming this AI to kind of live and breathe on its own a little bit. It's it's pretty amazing, the ideas behind that, and the very fact that you have subsumption, where you know this AI, once you turn it on, it does its thing, and then you have these subsumption values, where you as the player get close to say a pirate AI, and they physicalize that pirate AI in
These
that
probability
zone.
volumes, exactly.
Yeah. Yep. And then once you leave, then you know they be, you know they become part of the system again. Although the interactions that this pirate already had, so they start, they actually can start leveling up. I guess you could say leveling up as a character. Just some average day Joe AI. Then he starts building a rep for itself.
Yeah, definitely a track record,
Mhm.
and if they, certainly if their proficiencies, if they can, the more they do it, the better they get. It is, it's such an amazing thing. I mean, if you just think about just pathing, if you think, just take pathing, and I mean, your simplest pathing thought, my simplest pathing thoughts would be like, back in EverQuest, where like you had, say, a magician, I think it was, who could kind of create like different kinds of elementals that would maybe tank for them, like an air elemental or an earth elemental or whatever. And then, you'd run around and this thing would path like, crazy all over the place. And, you'd have these massive, famously, you'd kind of, or if you fell down like a level or whatever, it would path all the way to you. And then it would, pull all the mobs and you get wiped out or whatever. If you take like that old school, like pathing, and I mean, and listen, WoW had that pathing, every game has had that kind of pathing, and they're actually doing a version of pathing, but it's, they're building these navigation meshes that will interconnect. So, like if there's a navigation mesh inside a ship, and inside the ship, that AI knows what it can do because the navigation mesh is built in a way where they understand like all the things that they're capable of. And then when the ramp opens, the navigation mesh will extend to that. And then when they get down on the ground, it hooks, these of, that variability, for the AI that you would see, the ones that are subsumption AI. Yeah, the high fidelity AI. The fact that they're going to have, they're going to have these kind of proficiencies and traits. It's going to actually lead to a variety of different, ways that they kind of handle things and how good they are at handling specific things. And it's a huge leap forward. It's a very important for me to state. It's not consciousness. That's not what they're, the AI, but it is when you kind of have like programmatic algorithms versus like this huge level of autonomy that you're offering these AI, you're kind of stitching together this huge tapestry of their ability to kind of wander throughout the universe, kind of pick the type of, like what they're proficient at, give them some traits. It's really next level. I mean, it's leveling up. Computer games, if they manage to, if quantum, which is the whole simulation, if they can get this thing to work, and you can really tell. I mean, they've poured an enormous amount of time and energy into this. If they can get it to work right, it's going to actually fundamentally, I think, change games in the future in a way that, where literally, I think, like, if you want to build an MMO world, like in say 10 years from now, you'll start with the simulation first. Like it almost like at that level, because once you have the simulation, obviously, then from there you can certainly build all the subsumption AI and all that type of thing, and all that stuff can be simultaneously built. But this is an enormous leap forward, and then, and here comes in 3.18, one of the most critical things is that persistent entity streaming.
Well, quantum is going to control a lot of things in Star Citizen. It's, it's the big factor for the economy. What drives the economy? What causes the prices to fluctuate?
Yep.
What makes, some things better than others? Having all that working, to the point where, say, player characters can start causing ripples, with quantum, where you can start, causing changes in the market, causing changes with the way the AI, functions around a certain area. It's a pretty complex simulation. So they're, simulating, like 100,000 little AI bots running around that, is, causing the economy to ebb and flow, and the way it works. And, it is pretty wild that, we'll get into your, I think there's like the assumption AI, there is quantum AI, and then there's going to be, when you listen to the guys, they're calling the AI that you would have on your ship, they're calling those guys, maybe this is kind of a bleed over from, like Squadron 42, but they're calling those guys actors. Like, those guys are actors, those AIs that you interact with, say like in, like in Squadron 42, and then the AI that we're going to have as people that you can hire for your ships, and the companion AI, and the the creature AI, all these different things are going to be a little bit different. But what's pretty wild is the way that, you know the biggest thing for me, quantum is one of those things when you start talking about it, it's, when you listen to it, you're like, oh man, is this kind of like, you know, some kind of economic seminar, or, something like that, where it's like, you start trying to explain it to people and they kind of gloss over a little bit, right?
They do, and I think there's a good reason for it. I mean, it is a very abstract concept because a lot of it is happening in the background, and so the whole concept of, kind of having these, the whole system is called quantum, right? The whole simulation is called quantum, and like you said, there are all these, I think Tony Z said in that video that we watched from May 24, 2021, that there's going to be, like you said, between 50 and 100,000 quanta, which are the individual entities that kind of go around and actually, kind of do the things in the universe. And so, that's those quanta, are, they're all out there making their own decisions and that type of thing. And then you have, for the most part, they're ephemeral, right? They're not there, I mean, you can't see them. But then when you and here's the reason why. It's, if they were, of course, if there was 100,000 actual ships in the universe, the resource cost would be incredible.
Yeah,
they can't have all those ships physically drawn, at the fidelity that Star Citizen has them in. So they have these probability volumes, where you get into a range of these things and then it will draw them out, right? If you're not looking at it, the server isn't loading it. If somebody's not there looking at it, the server isn't loading it. Now there is this kind of, and I think you alluded to it a little bit. You have your, kind of your quanta, which is they're a back end simulation, but then you have, subsumption AI, which is them actually physicalized in front of you in all of their fidelity, all the fidelity, all the glory of what you normally see, them kind of doing things, and all the resource cost of that is huge. But then you also have they talked about just the virtual AI, which is kind of the thing that kind of goes on as they become kind of subsumption AI, or they disappear. There's this middle layer there that kind of makes a lot of decisions as well. So they've put, they've put an enormous amount of time and energy into this. And so not only do you have the whole simulation, they've built these analytic tools to kind of filter, with dashboards and graphs, kind of what's happening in the simulation. And, and of course they're actually planning on doing things like, kind of dynamically spawning events based on this stuff, or dynamically spawning missions based on this type of thing. So it is, it is an enormous project in the back end. Every day, if you happen to play Star Citizen, you get in the verse and you take your ship, you fly around, you do your things, right? It is going to be a very fascinating thing when they do kind of initiate this entire quanta system, where there is this whole simulation happening. The fact that they feel like in order to meet the fidelity requirements in Stanton, they need 50 to 100,000 of these entities, is kind of mind-blowing to me.
And actually, it was me too. We've kind of heard about this for a few years now from Tony Z, and if anybody's kind of kept up, we heard that. But First time I heard that number, I was like, holy shit.
Right.
You know, we're used to the games that we play, um, you know, in certain areas, there's, there's, a bunch of a bunch of that. We call it AI, but we'll just say NPCs. It's, they're very base, very base AI. Like WoW, or like what you were saying about, they're talking about WoW, or
Very algorithmic. They're just
yeah,
programmed
like any other
mobs.
game. It's
Right.
like, yeah, exactly. The mobs are programmed, to do certain thing. It's like you get within aggro range, mob's going to do X, Y, Z,
Right.
and you can kite the mobs and bring them out, or and then they get to a point where they go, well, they get to that, basically they get to that leash, and then they go back to what they were doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, in each zone, there's going to be so many NPCs. When you think of like 50 to 100,000 NPCs just rolling out, doing their own thing, and what makes these pretty great, and we'll kind of go into a lot, kind of a lot more detail, but the way that they're programming their behaviors, to have, you know, certain traits and certain behaviors. Is this guy, is he aggressive? Is he intelligent? And is he ambitious? Each individual NPC is going to have their own behavioral traits, and then you also kind of base it on what their tasks are. What type of NPC they are. Are they a minor NPC? What's the funny thing is that they don't necessarily go out and say, hey, well, this is a minor NPC and this is a pirate NPC and
Right.
this is a security NPC. These NPCs choose what they're going to do based on the parameters within their programming. So if they feel like the payout on mining is a lot more than cargo hauling, they're going to have, based on these, based on their behaviors, the NPC is going to choose to go, well, I'm going to choose mining because it pays the most, because, I'm more ambitious, I'm going to make more money. Or, to the very, even to the point where I'm risk averse. So
Yep.
I don't like combat. So I'm going to stay away from combat. Or, they may decide, well, I like, cargo hauling. And then you have the other ones that are aggressive AI, but then you have those parameters of where the morality is,
Right.
am I a bad guy or am I a good guy? So you have the aggression on that scale. It's like, well, I'm a good guy. So then they kind of go that security route, or I'm a bad guy and I decide to go that piracy route. The way they, set all this up, that's actually what blows my mind. And then, they turn it on and go, hey, you do your thing, and you kind of see, which directions all these guys go. It's like,
That's
well,
exactly
now
right.
I'm a miner, and then you go and you drop off your minables to a refinery, and then you have the cargo guys come in and pick up the metal from the refinery, and then they drop it off to the manufacturing guys. And it's this whole symbiotic relationship that goes on the back end that we never see until we run into, assumption. And then, those guys, they have their own particular traits. Like they showed that example of that of that one pirate guy, attacking the freighters that were going back and forth, and then which activates the AI to go, well, we need to send a bounty hunter after this guy because he's attacking our shipping routes.
Right.
And then you send, and then the game engine says, oh, well, we need to develop a mission around that. And then so you develop a mission, and now you have a bounty hunter mission where you have to go and find that one NPC. And then when you get close enough, then the NPC is not ethereal anymore. Since he's assumption AI, he becomes physicalized, and you get close enough, and now you see the guy. But this guy also has a behavior, right? So
Yep.
say he got the better of you. So he knows, well, now I'm going to go do the stuff I like. And what kind of blew me away is that they also said that, of course, the AI don't play by the same rules that player characters have. So these particular AI can go into areas that, if you had a bounty on you, or if you're kind of wanted by the police, you couldn't go into, but the AI can. So you can start tracking these people down in different places. It's like, we'll say the guy wants to go do his recreational stuff, so he goes to a bar, right? So he spends all his money at Port Alizar or something, and he says, oh, I'm out of money now. I've got to go, go back to piracy. And he goes back to his kind of like his favorite little areas, and he gets into these particular patterns. But if he becomes more successful at it, the bigger he will get, kind of start making a name for himself. They said that some of these guys could even become like crime bosses.
Yeah, they have a lifespan, right? And they have a record. And so, like one of the services, it's so there are these core technologies that are kind of important, and one of them, I think Tony Z mentioned, was the ATC service, right? And it's required. And the reason it's required is because, when Quanta land at Port Alisar or leave Port Alisar, or they pull off like a crime, like outside of a comm array or whatever, that stuff is noted. It's put on their record. They might start out as kind of a combat, kind of AI, but eventually, they're aggressive, and they're not very moral. And there's not, they all of a sudden, let's say there's on Yella, there's just kind of maybe they found a resource, and there's, or that aluminum's become very important to say, to Crusader or ArtCorp shops. So there's a lot more kind of mining and industrial vessels, say, in the area of Yella. And this guy's, his particular Quanta is aggressive and, and ambitious. And not necessarily terribly moral, and he begins kind of attacking, and he's, within a comm array, so he blows up. All this is happening potentially in simulation, but eventually, he kind of, like you said, he flies back to Port Alisar, kind of whatever, however they make these determinations, goes back out, pirates again, but eventually he's got a record, and and so dynamically, eventually he's going to have a bounty on his head. And then, as a player goes out and kind of tracks him down, they might kind of be able to look at his record and see, well, I see, every so often he comes back to Port Alisar, and he seems to be kind of flying back between Port Alisar and Yella. So I'm going to kind of set up and see if I can quantum interdict this guy, type of thing. And Tony Z does a really good job in the video of kind of explaining it. But, it is fascinating that there could be all these different types of quanta out there. And they really do, like you've mentioned, those traits. They're really using it to kind of spread out the quanta population. But there can be like these massive shortages, or there are things that don't necessarily, they're really trying to avoid having all the quanta just do one, the most lucrative thing, like, do one thing. And so that's why they're building all these different variables into the simulation. So they will do all these different things. It's amazing, really.
Yeah, one of the things, we've been kind of keeping up, with it for a little while now, but, any of these AI developers, every time, you watch stuff on them or read stuff, it's, I start thinking about, how sharp these guys really are. And with Francisco and those guys in the AI team,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, what it's just kind of pretty wild of, um, you know, we kind of know some of these dudes that, are kind of in that, the way their mind works is so logical, especially when, um, when you're trying to program AI, you got to go through, it's like you go through this logic, right? Of, setting the parameters and thinking of, everything that would make these, you know, setting all these different values and variables to make the AI, start working and thinking. It's all these different behaviors are programmed on the front end. So say you have um, so you program, well, let's just keep the number like, simple and say you program 10 different AI with 10 different behaviors. So we're working off a pool of AI that have, say, 10 different behaviors.
Right.
And so you've went in and created the logic for each individual of these 10 AI or these 10 NPCs. And you got to think of, well, this guy over here, he's kind of a meek dude, uh, very risk averse, but he also has a set of variables. His behavior says, well, I'm risk averse, but what are my talents? And then you're also, programming these talents and traits and stuff into these guys. And then so you got, you go through them all, and then you're, programming all these abilities into the guy. Say, well, this guy's an engineer. This guy right here is, proficient in combat. So he's a combat AI. And then this guy over here, he's a, we all kind of laugh about like, the bartender, but say this guy right here is a merchant AI,
Yep.
and then he has its set of behaviors. So you have 10 different ones with 10 different behaviors, but I kind of stepped over myself a little bit. So you have the people with 10, the AI with 10 different behaviors. So then you slot these guys into these particular tasks. Well, are you a merchant AI or are you an engineer AI? And then you set those parameters up, and then you give them task. What is their task and how you relate those tasks to the behavior that this particular AI has.
Right.
It's amazing that the amount of detail and the things that you have to think about when you're developing these AIs and programming their behaviors. Because once it's one of those things, they yes, you're going to have, like, say for instance, you have we get to the point where you have a pretty big ship and you need NPC to help you crew that ship, and there's going to be different grades of NPC. Is like, well, of course, you may not have a lot of funds on hand to pay for the best NPCs to crew the ship. You don't have the best to pay for the higher end engineers, or you don't have the best gunners or that type of thing. And it's wild that these guys have grades. And another thing too is that they programmed into their behavior is whether they're happy in their particular job or not. If you it's like, well, I can't afford a bunch of gunners or engineers, so I'm going to put a pilot in the role of as a gunner, or a pilot in the role as an engineer. And the AI wasn't necessarily programmed for that, but so you have these different unhappy traits as well, where it's like, I'm unhappy in my role, or maybe you don't pay them on time, or
Right.
something like that. Or these things are actually going to be, this is things that they talked about, programming into these these particular AI. But the very fact that say this particular AI, was programmed with these traits, and it's just like they give them all this ability and just kind of wind them up and let them roll as it relates to quantum. But then you have, the like the AI, the physicalized AI that you would hire and things, so the actor AI that they have their own particular set of parameters and traits and behaviors as well. Um, you know, Programming all that it's just so fascinating. The amount of things you have to think about when you're, you know, programming these traits. And, another thing that I was thinking about is the computational uh, power that it's going to take for a lot of this AI. They say it's on the lower end, especially when they deal with the simulation, sort of like quantum. But what about these other AI that become kind of physicalized? It's
Right.
how much how much how much detail are they really gonna give these AI? And you know say in the future, when we have a lot more compute power and a lot better idea. We talked about this before about the idea that Google is already created an AI that's self-aware. uh because we know when you're developing AI, it's programmed with a set of parameters. And do you teach it how to learn, and can it deviate from the programming that you've already programmed into it? And how how many you know deviation patterns, how far out can it really go? And in the future, when you program the thing, it's just like, you know m- right now the things work because it calls for, the AI calls for information. And so, look, well, what am I supposed to do? You see it
Right.
right now. With AI, you go down to a bunker, you see it right now. The security AI is looking at the pirate guys, and the pirate guys are looking at the AI, and they're like, because there's such a, you know, because there's such a load on the server. It takes several server ticks for it to get commands, so it doesn't know what it's doing.
Right.
So it's kind of working on a hive mind, so to speak. So it's like, oh, this particular AI, it's trying to call the server to say, hey, server, what am I supposed to be doing right now? But in the future, we talked about server meshing, and kind of kind of equaling out the load a little bit with the more servers, the more you can kind of spread the load across those different servers. And you're definitely going to have a faster response time to a lot of those as it relates to AI. I thought about what would it do. One of my ideas was, yeah, that you can share the load across all those servers. When does it get to a point where, you know say I had I don't know, say 100 or 50 to 100 servers that I could spread all this computational load across, uh, in
It's a
the
good question.
server meshing scenario, opposed to having a group of servers that dealt, when they called for information. It's like you have a server that all it does is creates the universe that you know that you live in, that the game is taking place in. And then you have the other servers that deal with the other task. So you have one server that deals with planetary streaming information, takes the load off. So you have one server as the master.
Right.
Then you have the other servers that their whole task is delegated to dealing with this thing. You have one server that, its one task is dealing with, you know, um, AI, and for the AI to, get its marching orders from. And when does it come to a point where you can, we call it physicalized or whatever, but these particular entities where you program that particular entity from the go, it doesn't have to, it doesn't have to get its marching orders from another cert. It gains its resource. Yeah. So you have one server dedicated to the AI and everything else, and then you spread the load that way. Was it where you have a bunch of different servers that do a couple of different things that give each one of these things its computational power, or having 50 to 100 servers that you can spread the load equally across?
Well, I mean, and this is
how
where
much data,
yeah, this is where cloud computing just kind of absolutely takes us to the next level, right? Because you have this incredible elasticity. Like, you literally on the fly can ramp up, additional CPUs and RAM. So as these subsumption events happen, right, where you need a whole bunch more fidelity, that you absolutely can lean on the elasticity of the cloud. I mean, it's just, it is, this is it's one of the brilliant things behind, I mean, you're really making such an excellent point, but it's one of the brilliant things behind this, handling it this way, is because, as you dynamically require more resources, the elasticity in cloud-based computing, is going to solve that problem. And it's not seamless, and I know that there's still a little bit of time and technology that needs to kind of lend itself to this, but that's the type of thing that is going to absolutely be such a massive game changer. Is you have these types of services, these back-end technologies that are really not even related to game development at all. They're just kind of like, they're related to just kind of resource requirements, and huge spikes in requirements, and being able to, kind of seamlessly kind of meet those necessities. And so you're making an excellent point. I mean, like that we maybe have arrived at a place technologically, where some of the just kind of the cloud-based infrastructure can really work to solve a lot of the fidelity issues, because it's obviously an enormous amount less resources to to kind of have these ethereal AI in the background. But if for some reason that and there may be a reason that these AI get into some kind of a battle over resources, and then you show up there could be an enormous amount of subsumption that needs to happen. And that, that's when like the dynamic server, like the server meshing, but the back end cloud AI tech can spin up additional CPUs and resources, balloon up to kind of meet the requirement, solve the problem, and then ramp back down, when the thing gets quiet again.
Isn't that what their Quasar app? Isn't that what they were using to create those dynamic events? That where
Yes.
they spool up things like, like the Ninetales event or Xeno threat. They're using that now. Now, at some point when server meshing rolls in and they can rely on spreading the load around, then they'll let quantum take control of all these different dynamic events.
Yeah, I mean, you're really hitting the nail on the head. I mean, so you have this simulation going on in the background that we've already kind of spoke on that, and how that you have these 50 to 100,000 kind of quanta entities, going around and they're doing all sorts of, we've talked about them having traits, and we've talked about them having their, kind of their proficiencies and those types of things. And so, if you kind of let your mind wander a bit, you've got some that are freighters, some that are, security guys, some that are traders, some of them are miners and they're hauling aluminum back to the different manufacturing facilities, and of course, then you tie in other things like the law system. There's going to be, there's heat maps and these types of things about where the felonies are happening, or where there's, where there's a lot of industrial activity and those types of things. They've built this incredible other layer to kind of extract the data out of that simulation, which is called Odin. And that Odin is basically, a couple of different components, but it's essentially analytics. Analytics and so you can kind of filter on specific things that you're trying to you're trying to kind of get a holistic glimpse at, say, what's going on in the quanta simulation. So then all of a sudden they can begin filtering using dashboards and graphs, and then they have, it's not just quanta that they're actually kind of pulling into that as analytics. It's also, as you and I move out through the verse, they can take a look at player movements and player activities as well. They also can have,
Big Brother is watching.
Oh yeah. Well, they also have like real time and historical timelines, so they can look and see like, well, historically, this much aluminum was kind of mined and moved to these places. Why is there this huge spike in it now? Type of thing. And they might be able to see if a bunch of quanta are kind of, overpopulating or oversaturating a certain kind of loop or a certain kind of thing or whatever. So they have all these tools that they can use to kind of, kind of squeeze data out and look at the data, kind of give it a, like a dashboard or another way for them to kind of graphically review whether or not everything's working the way that they want. And kind of pivoting right back to what you're saying, that's when they can actually, they have these dynamic missions, these dynamic events that they can kind of, potentially, it's so weird, it's like back in the day, like in the computer virus was designed because these mainframes couldn't go down. They needed a way to kind of go in, change the code on mainframes without actually having the systems go down. You know what I mean? So like they're going to use kind of initially, like you were saying, like these manually pushed kind of dynamic events maybe as a corrective measure potentially for something that's going weird in the simulation, they may kind of, they have some overpopulation of, of miners in an area. They're just going to push a bunch of pirates in there and, kind of thin it out a bit or whatever. They're going to dynamically push these events. But you're absolutely right. I think the goal is to sometime where they don't have to kind of manually trigger these corrective things, that quanta itself can do some self-correction, and then just kind of, based on whatever probability volumes, or thresholds or these types of things that are eclipsed, where it itself can actually make decisions on the types of things that, either dynamic missions that may actually impact that thing in a way to kind of even it out, or there are some dynamic events that they're, like I said, they may be originally kind of manually triggered in the back end based on some analytics that they're looking at. But eventually, I think the goal is to have them have the AI, make the decision to trigger those things. And that, like I said, we're really getting into a completely, like a paradigm shift in the way that you're, not like you use the word tether, which is such a beautiful word, like when a mob is you run away from it and it like goes back on its leash or whatever, like it runs, like we've all done that, right? Every one of us who's played an MMO, we kind of, maybe pull a camp, you're being chased by the 6 orcs, maybe you use feign death. You know what I mean? And 3 of them walk away and you get up again and then you run a little bit further, and so you're being chased by 3 and then you feign death again and then 2 of them walk away and then you stand up right to get that last guy, right? So you've kind of broke the camp. You managed to pull the one guy. that whole old school type of thinking, mob, pathing, algorithmic stuff is going to be completely. They're going to use a tiny bit of it, but it's going to be completely like we're just going through a paradigm shift. That stuff's not going to exist the same way.
Well, as a one of the things, to kind of, going off that kiting analogy, one of the things I thought of is going to get to a point, they have nav mesh, they're, developing nav mesh now, so the NPCs, know how to traverse the environment, and, how, basically they're going to keep them on a leash a little bit too, because they're, only going to extend the nav mesh out so far. So, you're still going to be able to kite a little bit. But, they were talking about a little, not to get off my point, because I'll lose my place because I'll start going down the road. But, to kind of go off a little bit, they said that, when they didn't have any restrictions to the nav mesh, that the AI just kind of would go and wander off. It's like, hey, what's over
so
here?
funny.
And then just kind of go do it, because these AI have been programmed with a behavior.
Right.
And, so they're looking for, their little, whatever their idea of things, they're looking for their little things to do. So they'll wander off, which I find pretty fascinating. So right now, the way the behavior is currently, that, they have to kind of confine them to an area. But what is it when, you get, a little further down the road, where you build in the idea with the AI where it doesn't need nav mesh anymore. The game is programmed in such a way that you program the AI, the NPCs, that, especially the ones that are subsumption or physicalized, where they don't need the nav mesh anymore. They know how to, traverse obstacles. They know how to climb up that. One of the things that, that reason that you're going to see a lot of the drop ships will be ships that have, backdoor ramps, is right now that's the only, the only thing that they can go up and down. They don't know how to climb ladders and stuff at this point. That's going to be fixed in the future. But, the only way that they can get out of the ship is to go down a ramp. But, it's going to get to a point where, the AI is going to be created where it already knows how to traverse an area. They know, it's like, hey, that's a ladder. That's the quickest way to get up, into the ship, or that's the only way to, or they see a ladder on the outside of something else, and it's like, oh, I know how to climb that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and
all these behaviors and things are going to be programmed into the thing say these planets and things are going to be developed, the ships, you're going to program all this stuff on the back end where it doesn't need nav mesh anymore. It goes, oh, I know how to do these things, and you can just wind them up and turn them loose, so.
Yeah, I mean, the entire, the entire game world will be just one giant nav mesh that they can just kind of, traverse. You're absolutely right. And here's the, kind of thinking about, it's just like, as we talk about kind of, early computing, where we've I've spoken on it a couple of times tonight, where you have this algorithmic, just kind of programmed mob, or programmed kind of things that the creatures did, and then how this is kind of a paradigm shift forward to have this kind of system where you have these lightweight entities that have kind of these decisions that are based on attributes, proficiencies, traits, these types of things, and then of course kind of they're kind of lent themselves towards the game loops that are in the game, specifically like that. So what's the next, like we're alluding to something like what's some of the potential future tech. you're absolutely right. It's going to be like machine learning, right? Which where at some point the quanta, will maybe potentially have the ability to kind of learn from what the players are doing. You know what I mean? And where they're actually kind of, they're collecting all the analytics, right? Of course, all the quanta analytics are collected, but then the player analytics are also what the players are doing potentially. The quanta is going to be able to, is like, hey, like the humans are actually, they're being a little more efficient than we are at this. So there's machine learning, right? Is that next logical step. And after machine learning, you really start getting into actually true AI, like insane AI, where it literally just begins kind of gaming the system in a way, like where we're eventually people who are kind of game masters or whatever will realize that the AI is at such a significant advantage, because when it's in an ethereal state, it's not encumbered. They'll have the same kind of costs for movement and that type of thing, you know what I mean? But it won't be encumbered by any, so it's like, hey, it's like, if you think about if you've ever had your 6-year-old in a ball field and he's standing out there and he's like, oh, there's a butterfly, and he starts waving his mitt at it and the ball goes by him or whatever. Humans are, like me, it's like, I'm not running as efficiently as possible. I sometimes stop and look at Crusader and be like, that is awesome looking. I'm gonna take a screenshot, or like while we're busy bent over laughing at each other for kind of, maybe crashing a ship, or maybe the game kind of acted funny and we wound up sideways on a ship. The AI is not encumbered by those things. It's gonna, it doesn't really, it's not quite there yet at the conscious level where things are funny to it or that type of thing. It's going to be, so the people who are running the game are going to have to kind of, all right, well, we're going to, and I think you see this there are other games where like you take on like StarCraft comes to mind, right? If you take on like the hardest level of, they have accelerated capabilities and that type of thing, so, there will come a time when, the quanta is just better at us than doing things with machine learning and just looking at how we do things and just learning from our mistakes. It's really, like I said, I really, it's so weird, like there are these things in life. It's just like, like when man began to like harness fire, that it's a game changer, obviously the personal computer from an exponential learning standpoint, that's only 120 years ago. If you think about it, 130 years ago, man, there were no big jets in the sky. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't that long ago, man. It's just, you go back a couple generations. My grandfather remembers his grandfather, and his grandfather did not fly in his lifetime for the most part, that much, So, we are, exponentially technology's gone through the roof, and I do not think that technology exists. A lot of there's been always a lot of complaints about how long Star Citizen has taken. I think the dream has always been bigger than the technology, and I think it still is. I truly believe that the dream is bigger than the technology even today, and they're waiting for the technology. It's like the same thing. I think you and I have talked about it, where George Lucas, he couldn't shoot Attack of the Clones. Like that, he couldn't shoot that movie. There's no way he was going to be able to shoot that movie, at the time that he conceived it, because they just didn't have the technology to do it. The CG,
nope.
CG wasn't around.
Absolutely right. Yeah, we're really, not to go down the rabbit hole. It depends on.
Oh, I went. I did, man. I put it in 4-wheel drive and drove right out into the weeds, sir.
It's true. It's it's the funny thing. You could even go back to Moore's law, where they were talking about, how much compute power that we can have on a, like on a silicone die.
Right.
And heck, that was, we had supposed to reach our limit back in the 2000s, man, and we blew by that. Hell, we're still, we're finding better and better ways. The next the next, that we're talking about when we're upgrading our stuff, say the next AM5, from AMD, you know, it's getting down on that, 5 nanometer and 7 nanometer, um, you know,
And they're
the
packing a
one
hell of a lot of
that's
technology
that
on
is
that stuff.
wafer thin, very wafer thin.
Yes.
So, you know, um, so yeah, man, we're still, cooking along as it relates to compute technology for sure.
Yep.
I mean, we could talk about a lot of other things that, we should probably be way further along. But like you said before, we are reaching these levels at an exponential rate. And say if, you didn't have anything that kind of retarded the process, how much further would we have been down the road? I mean, it took us, literally 60 years to start working, from the point that we started flying to the point that we went to the moon. I mean, we went to the moon in 60 years, and it took 8 years for us to get to the moon. Within that one decade, we were able to get to the moon. And then, and it seems like we put the brakes on a lot of our technology, right? We're like, oh, well, we did that. And back into our, normal little lives we went. But as it relates to, compute technology now, I mean, we'd have never imagined, you look at, look at old Star Trek, the like next gen stuff, and holy cow, man. Our, even our phones, our smartwatches,
Yep.
have way more, technological capabilities than we were watching
Than the Moonlander had. I mean,
with like tricorders and stuff,
Oh,
right?
exactly. So, I mean, yeah. I mean, your Apple smartphone has more compute technology than the Moonlander had.
Yeah,
Probably by magnitude, orders of magnitude.
Orders of magnitude. Yes, you could have probably, run mission control, with your one desktop PC could have run mission control, So it's pretty wild how far we've come for sure.
It is.
And you were talking about, machine learning with the AI. I mean, we're, I don't know how far, they're planning on taking it, but say it does get to the point, because these guys, as it relates to what they want to do, man, they have no restraints. Chris Robertson, it's like, dude, I want these things to be living and breathing.
Right.
I want it to start, doing machine learning and that type of thing.
Right.
I mean, we even know now that, we, talked a little bit about, how they program their behaviors and stuff. They're even given, like, say like an NPC at ArcCorp. Take the barista, for instance. They're programming these NPCs to go to work, leave work at a certain time, go back to where they live, and go to bed, get up, go to work, and do their things. They even talked a little bit about them, stopping at their favorite bar, like maybe stopping at G-Lock or something while they're at Area 18. Programming these behaviors, like walking to work, is like, maybe I want to get something out of the vending machine.
Right.
Whatever it is, and they're actually taking it that far. So, it's not a big stretch to say further down the road that, yeah, let's see how far we can really take this stuff. Let's start programming all this stuff with machine learning, or whatever the case may be. It's or maybe they know one of the guys at Google and go, hey, this is how we this is how we make this thing become self-aware.
Well, and one of the things,
or whatever, we're speculating, but hey, it could happen. I even joked, when they were describing the way they wanted to do AI, back in 2014, 2015, 2016 era, you go back and listen to a lot of that old stuff, that man, and it sounded wild. The stuff that they wanted to do, you're like, no way they can pull this off,
Right.
because it's something that was unheard of, and you're like, wow. And even to the point where it's like, why would you want that much fidelity in an in an NPC, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And you're like, wow. I did kind of joke at some point, when they flick that switch, when the persistent universe goes live, man, it's like, I laughed. It's like, it's going to be the beginning of Skynet or something, but yeah, man, all joking aside, that the way we listen to these guys, how passionate they are, how sharp, all of CIG's developers, and are sharp people. They, pretty amazing. They're building something that no one has ever even attempted to do.
Yeah.
Because it was just too damn hard, or it was hard, or it wasn't. It wasn't.
Well, they were tethered to the old system. I mean, there's money involved.
Exactly. It was a money thing, right?
Right, of course.
It's like, hey, we just want to build a game that does this, and you're kind of constrained by time and money, right? These guys are not.
No.
They're not constrained by the same limitations that other game developers have. And if I was a game dev and was looking for a job, I would want to be going where they were, breaking new ground, riding on that razor's edge, man, being at the forefront of futuristic tech for gaming. That's where I'd want to be. And coming up with these new tools, designing these new gaming tools, and just being on the cutting edge. That's where I'd want to be. And when we're talking about these the AI devs, we talked a little bit earlier about how sharp I thought those guys were, man. It's like how to get into that area, it's like how logical their mind is. It's like I know that like Francisco and those tats, I mean, they cut up a lot, man, but it's like what type of logic do these guys kind of run on, man? It's like you think about, hey man, are these guys a bunch of Spocks or something, right? So
A lot of math, I'm sure, right?
yeah, it's pretty.
But
pretty amazing.
the crazy thing is they built, they're building the toolboxes, right? And I think that's it is really, one of those amazing things is building the toolbox that allows you to kind of build the things in a pipeline that's much faster. So it's just like, not only are they actually pulling it off, I mean, they are building the toolbox to make it actually accelerate and go faster, and so it is, I mean, it's so crazy. I mean, you and I, and it shouldn't be lost on us. I mean, or anybody else out there. I mean, Zel and I are not young guys. We're not old guys. We're kind of right in the middle there, I think, one of the things that Star Citizen is
right age.
Yeah, exactly. The perfect age. One of the things that starts, and I know this from my stream, right? I stream, and occasionally, I'll be blessed and there'll be, maybe 100, 150 people, only a couple hundred people on there, and I know, because it comes up a lot in the stream, is Star Citizen's age of their gamer is a little bit older. I think, there's lots of times, there are guys that are around, 35 or something like that. Very, but there are many times, I'm in my 49th year of life. I'm going to be 50 not terribly long from now. There are many times I'm talking to people that are 52, 55, 60, 70 years old, it's such an amazing thing. And, Star Citizen has done this amazing thing of kind of taking all the nostalgia from the early computing, and of course, and really kind of borrowed from like all of the other, kind of things that came before it, like Star Trek, and and certainly Star Wars, and of course The Expanse, and snapping my fingers, but there was another series. I should know the name of the series because I loved it, but there are all these different series, and pull that stuff forward, and it pulled all this technology forward, and they're untethered completely by that old-fashioned model, and here's the thing, they definitely have tapped into, an enormous, and it's controversial, but there's an enormous amount of wealth, but there are people like you and me, Zel, who absolutely want, just for the fact that I want this to succeed. It's such an amazing, you have the super high fidelity, you mix all the awesome superhero stuff of flying ships around. You know what I mean? It's the closest thing to traversing a distant planet that we may ever have. There certainly could be some single player games that are wonderful experiences. That's the one thing I want to say. The big difference here, one of the most massive differences here, is the fact that this is an MMO also. It's not like Kingdom Come Deliverance, which does have, some level of people kind of getting up in the morning and doing, going through their routines and going to bed at night. That's a single player game. It's a super fun single player game, but there's nothing quite like it being an MMO with this level of fidelity, with this huge ambitious project goal in the background. And then taking, kind of the most like you said, the most cutting edge technologies, putting some of the really kind of the industry, I would, say some of the industry leaders, in compute technology, and then having them build a toolbox to make a kind of next generation game. And I do understand some people are like, hey, the graphics to me don't look that dated. I think the fidelity's fantastic. Now, some could argue about that. I understand that's a little bit subjective, but I think Star Citizen still looks pretty fantastic.
What they're, when it relates to things like that, what they don't understand is, this is all a preamble, right?
Yes.
And, this is all preparation. You look on the progress tracker right now, and, you can find where they're working on, the way things look. And by the time this game launches again, or by the time this game launches, all the art assets and everything else, will definitely be sharpened up.
Sure.
They're still working on, making, your character, NPCs, all this stuff. They're going to be, sharpening this up, polishing it up, where, and one of the reasons, you were wanting to get into this conversation anyway, is that, we talked about when is it going to get to the point where the AI is indistinguishable from player characters. So, they're working on the way the AI looks when it walks. They're working on the way, when it, pulls a weapon or uses a tool, how it interacts with the environment around it.
Yes.
All these things are going to be polished up and tweaked. The graphics, we talked a little bit about it before about, how we could change the lighting on it and give it a little bit more, change the hues up and give it a little bit more warmth, a little bit more color depth.
Yep.
Those, all those things are coming.
Yeah, let's
get the framework worked out.
Oh yeah, you're exactly right. The optimization passes that you're talking about, the polish passes. That stuff hasn't even occurred. You're exactly right. There have been polish passes, don't get me wrong, but not the final polish passes.
Oh no. And a lot of these, it's just building the framework, right?
Exactly.
the
Putting
the
all, like Tony
graphical,
Z says, putting all the plumbing in.
yeah, putting the plumbing in, and all the graphical stuff will definitely be changed, down the road.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not worried with these guys. I'm not even worried about it. How many times have you ever played, any beta in a game, or like pre-releases, and the assets in the beginning usually end up looking like crap, or you know they don't put the
Oh,
textures
are there
on the
placeholders in
ground,
there?
so it
Yeah,
looks like it's
exactly.
green. It's like green carpet, or green,
Yep.
or just like a big old area that just kind of looks like a big green blob. But then when they add the assets in, when they add the textures in, when they add you know tessellation and all these other factors that kind of bring all that to life, then it starts looking amazing.
Yes.
And even at the state Star Citizen is right now, still looks amazing.
It does.
And by the time of release in a couple of years, it's going to be even more so, because they're still, these guys never seen, been one of my criticisms for a long time. They never rest on their laurels. When they find a new way of doing things, man, they just pipe it right back in. It's like they
Yep.
change the toolkit all the time.
Yes, they're
You know, they're
constantly
trying to,
retooling and upgrading
yes,
the toolkit.
yes, they're adding new technology as they go all the time. And at the end of the day, these are the type of guys, sort of like us. If we were designing a video game, uh, you know, even when we thought we crossed the finish line, we'd still be trying to innovate, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Trying to make it better and different, and bringing all that in. And I think building the groundwork for things in the future. I see this constantly. One of the things that I have faith in, and you were talking before about what attracts us to this game, and that how we bought into the idea. We love the idea, and we wanted to be along for the ride.
Right.
And is that these the developers, and Chris Roberts, those are the type of guys that want to keep this rolling, and it's going to be ever evolving. This is one of the things for a game like this one, to keep the fidelity the way it is, you would have to go under the idea that they're going to be constantly evolving the game. They're going to be changing the graphics out.
Right.
It's not going to be one of those games that just gets old and starts looking like crap. They're going to keep up with the technology, change the graphics out, give the character creator a little bit more. They change the graphical textures out. They change, a lot of this stuff is right now, even like what I said, going back to the NPCs, and making them look more realistic and lifelike, the way they interact with the world. And we talked a little bit about how if they keep going down the same road. I mean, this kind of really goes back into what we were talking about earlier on. Is like, if they keep following down this road, that they're going to start, they're going to keep improving the AI behaviors.
Right.
You're talking about machine learning, or things like these are the things that are going to keep the game fresh and ever evolving into the future. So for a lot of people, it says, oh, well, it doesn't look as good as some of these new games that are coming. Well, this game isn't done yet. All the things, all the plumbing has been put in place.
Right.
So the game can keep evolving.
Well, and I mean, yeah, and when you're busy designing, lasers, futuristic stuff. I mean, there's a whole lot of the technology is now being able to, allow them to realize some of the dream. We may not necessarily know all the different technology that they're necessarily planning on around the corner. Their budget has allowed them to dream really big, and I think that they've got an enormous amount of support, and we'll have to see how it continues to go. It has been somewhat durable, even with when the industry kind of likes to kind of finger waggle Star Citizen a little bit, because the industry doesn't it can't necessarily understand what Star Citizen is attempting to do, because it doesn't fit in any of their models, because it's much bigger than their models, it's much more ambitious than their models. There isn't there's no deadline. There's a enjoy the ride and build this insane thing, and for years to come, I think that we'll be and every day is a blessing, so you certainly don't know what the future brings. But for years to come, I think, we are going to be potentially looking at, maybe we'll get into some kind of if I just allow myself to think around the corner, Squadron 42 comes out. It definitely has its playthrough. It eventually has some different episodes that come along. It's episodic or whatever. Of course, then but in between those episodes and that type of thing, they definitely ramp up, more systems, more biomes. And we haven't even seen the first Alien, like the first Banu world, or the first, Xi'an world, or the first Vandal world. You know what I mean? I'm sure some of that stuff is, in Squadron 42. But I will say that, I myself haven't seen it, that stuff. But I just, it is really going to be fascinating as more and more systems come online. It's just, it's just an unbelievable. I mean, just flying around. I've spent a year and a half in Stanton. It never ceases. The scale never ceases to amaze me. And I am, obviously really looking forward to the universe expanding. But I am also really, really looking forward to, Quanta currently kind of deals with fuel and repair materials and those types of things. Kind of, I bet you, if we were to really, if we were to understand the scope of it, it's probably at a fairly limited level, not nearly as much as it will in the future. But man, like down the road when, with obviously all your, when it's really fully controlling your service beacons and your dynamic mission spawning and your dynamic event spawning, and, and then you take all of the different, all of these different kind of things, but then you have 4 or 5 systems to travel to pick up things and haul things. And, it's just a fascinating project. There's so many different layers to it. And it really, I'm so happy we got to talk about I myself had not really taken the time to put the proper amount of respect on the level of fidelity that Star Citizen is trying to pull off with the back-end technology. I mean, it is a fascinating thing to just consider persistent entity streaming. The fact that there is this massive simulation in the background until you kind of get into a probability bubble, a probability volume, and then you might run into this thing that just kind of materializes, out of the simulation via subsumption, in all of its fidelity, in all its glory, and it's, the game is just, it's mind-blowing, the different levels. It's super exciting.
Well, one of the things, yeah, exactly. And the more that, you and I, go further down the rabbit hole, the more we find out, especially when you go back and read what a lot of the devs want, you look at the interviews, and not to say that I'm a, totally arrogant dude or anything like that, it's I feel like I'm, a pretty smart guy. And every time that, you and I, kind of, go into what possibly could be, and we go into speculation and things like that, you find out, man, these guys have thought of that already.
Mm-hmm.
These are pretty sharp guys, and they're constantly thinking about, how all this stuff interconnects.
Oh yeah.
And they're getting to the point where they've kind of caught up with, it's like, they have a lot of these great pie in the sky ideas. And it's sort of like, you know, we got to figure out how to make that work,
Yeah.
and now they're getting to the point where they've kind of figured it all out, and they're putting these pieces together. And you got to think, like I said before, this is going to be something that's going to be ever evolving. And, with the way they got, on the Quanta, and some of these apps that are kind of connected to Quanta, like Odin, where they're tracking all these analytics,
Mm-hmm.
and they're gathering all this data, even for player characters, where they're like, oh, what are player characters seem to be doing, in this particular area. That'll allow them to go, oh, well, maybe they like doing this, and they go
Yep.
through and they look at the missions that they've already designed, and go, which one of them, which are these missions that are right in that good difficulty level, that are have playability that people like, which ones that that the player base like to finish, and which ones that they don't like to finish.
Yeah, the mission analysis.
Which ones end up being boring, which ones that type of analytics allows them to develop fun and engaging missions as well. So that's going to be an ever evolving thing. And to get further on down the road, you got to think that there's a lot of things we haven't even considered or thought about yet, because once the game goes live, we talked about earlier, where it's going to keep on rolling. Like you take hopefully if everything goes to plan, that this game is going to have a longevity to it. It's got infinite playability, that's for sure. So if they keep making great stuff, keep developing, we haven't hit the new, thinking about the future, like new DLCs and the new patches.
Oh my gosh.
It's like once they can kind of go, shoo, we finally got it out the door. Well, now let's start thinking about the future, and all the stuff that we can bring in, the new alien races, and new ship designs, and whenever like things we talked about last week with are they going to get to that 100 system mark, and then if you hit that 100 system mark, are they going to start adding new systems?
And manufacturing and crafting and so many different. I mean, getting all the game loops in place. Just think about just one. Like you and I love talking, like thinking about salvage. Kind of like I just can't wait to that day where I kind of come across this old battleground that has all these derelicts. You know what I mean? And just kind of begin pulling some away, and then all of a sudden finding some weird, very, very like either military designed or alien designed thing that's just unique. And the one thing I will say that speaking of that really quickly, about there was the Star Citizen Live that just happened, on Friday, and they did talk about how they love kind of sneaking things in the game and allowing the players to find those things. I cannot tell you how much I loved hearing that, because there's something special about being, finding something unique in the game. You know what I mean? They should really, 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 really kind of put unique things in just weird. Like, I love that idea. Where just like, why was this guy way out in the middle of this how did he possibly find this thing? It's like a needle in a thousand. It's like lightning hitting the needle in the haystack. For him to find that thing. How did he do
Yeah,
it?
or especially for adding all these unique items and old metals and artifacts, and the idea that we're just on that proto level of you know even talking about artifacts and you know the implications of that, of being out and be able to find say like old alien runes, and exploring the runes and finding these artifacts, and going into that exploration gameplay, and how far that's going to go, and so that just goes to show you with them putting artifacts into the game. They already have an idea what they're going to do.
Yes, they do.
So
and they have an enormous amount of lore. They have and obviously just the project it's like I think you've alluded to the fact it's like an onion. You start peeling back the layers and the layers and the layers of it. It's fairly amazing. If you take all of the technology things we discussed tonight, all of just the history of just computer gaming, the things that Chris Roberts has done in the past, and then all of the just all of the lore. I mean, just the lore, and then just the basics. Space flight and space stations and orbital comm arrays, and it's mind blowing. I mean, it really is mind blowing how incredibly thick with stuff and conversations and that Star Citizen is.
Well, yeah. I mean, with the technology right now, we've only scratched the surface.
So true.
We kind of hit the high points, and all the all the interesting stuff, and hopefully it was engaging enough to listen to. It didn't sound like an insurance seminar. So from our base understanding of what they're trying to accomplish, we're just kind of feeding you the abridged version, and basically that's what we know is the abridged version too, and hopefully we put it into perspective and digestible chunks, and made it sound interesting, and so it's something that we'll definitely, the more and more we learn about it, it's definitely something that we're going to get into into the future, the further down the rabbit hole it goes. So I hope you guys have been engaged and learned a little bit. I think I learned a little bit. About yourself?
Well, and I think you're hitting the nail on the head. You and I are going to continue to kind of hit the macro and the micro. There are many times where we're going to be looking at the 10,000 foot view, but when you're building something with such fidelity, there are many times you can spend the whole afternoon just talking about the micro. You know what I mean? Just as it refines down to the smallest details. And so in that capacity, we're super blessed with this project because it does have scale, kind of in a very, very, in a massive way, big and small. And so, I just want to say, obviously as we kind of are crossing the Rubicon here, how, I hope that you people who have the opportunity to take a listen to this, if you've made it this far, I just want to say how much I appreciate Anybody who's as interested in this project as Zel and I, at just kind of a computer nerd level. There's a lot of humanistic stuff in here as well. This is, computer gaming has been a big part of my life, as far as from a hobby standpoint. But also just from I've had an enormous amount of good time, just kind of meeting different people through this medium and that type of thing. And Zel, I just, will just, say to you how much I enjoy these conversations along the way. I do, they're very organic, right? We just kind of start, we kind of have a topic and some ideas about what we want to talk about, but there's not a lot of script to these. So,
No, we just kind of, yeah, this, things that we talk about is kind of like, it develops as it goes along.
It does.
So, and we love the idea that we keep these conversations organic. A lot of times we'll kind of get off topic a little bit and definitely get off the road. But we kind of enjoy that a little bit, and we hope you guys do too. Even though that sometimes we'll forget a point and maybe not circle back to to kind of finish off our thought, but we hope you guys are enjoying it, and I most certainly do, man. I love our conversations.
I think it's great,
and further down the road, things happening in the future and things that we can talk about. This is most definitely something that I just love being able to, have these conversations with you and, bring a little bit of, of our little shtick on things, right? So
yeah, it really is exactly. The way that we look at things and still kind of, not terribly long. Not that we, I've been a backer since 2014. But I definitely still, man, my glasses are very rose tinted. I love the project. I understand it's got tons and tons and tons of challenges. But anything in life worth doing has tons and tons and tons of challenges.
Absolutely true, brother. That's absolutely true. Well, are you done pontificating?
I think so. Yeah. Just want to, I just want to say once again, thanks for everybody for listening. Every week I definitely let Zel do the sign off. It's, he does such a great job, and I'm not going to step on my own toe this time. So take us away, sir.
Well, guys, thanks for coming along on the journey. If you've made it this far, I want you guys to make sure you subscribe to the channel, you hit the like button, and give us a little engagement down in the comments. It's, tell us what we're doing right, tell us what we're doing wrong. If you don't have that much to say but love it, hey man, just put a smiley face or a thumbs up or a hang loose or something, tell us, hey, we're doing a good job, or tell us where we can improve. We love the engagement, so make sure you do that. And also, we're going to be putting in the show more down in the comments. We're going to be adding our Spotify and iTunes links. So if you guys, want to take us on the go and are listening to us on, if you have a Spotify account or an iTunes account, you'll be able to find us there. So, stay tuned. We got a lot of stuff coming up, and we sure do appreciate it. So, for all us here at the Rock Runners Report, good night.